Before the piper ever came, Hamelin had already begun to rot. The townsfolk blamed the rats, and to a degree, they were right. The vermin poured from cracks in the stone and clawed through floorboards like flood water, teeming ravenous. They gnawed grain to dust, spoiled the meat, and bit at hands in the night. But their arrival was not the beginning. Hamelin had been rotting long before the first whiskered muscle appeared. Children played in alleys, laughing through teeth too sharp, cradling dolls stitched from sinew and bone. Mothers woke from nightmares of drowning cradles and found their hands wet with sweat, or worse. The church bells rang hollow, and bread left in the market overnight soured under a sky that refused to lighten. People stopped naming their babies, stopped speaking of tomorrow, and quietly they began to whisper, "He is coming." No one said who he was, but every heart knew. Then, one grey morning, he arrived. The piper. He came from nowhere, walking barefoot into the square, just as the sun tried and failed to rise. His clothes shimmered with colours that didn't belong to fabric or dye, like oil on water, like bruises blooming beneath skin. His flute hung from a chain around his neck, carved from a pale bone that no animal on earth had ever owned. He gave no name. He didn't need to. He played once. The sound that left the flute wasn't music so much as motion, rhythmic, irresistible. From the cracks and gutters and cellars, the rats surged forth in a single heaving mass. Thousands of slick bodies moved as one, chasing the tune that tugged at them like a hook behind the eyes. They flowed toward the river, a living tide of fur and teeth, and threw themselves in, squealing as they sank. Their cries softened into bubbles, then silence. The townsfolk rejoiced and refused to pay. Behind their shutters, they laughed. A tune for gold? They scoffed. Let him eat his flute. That night he returned. This time the melody was gentler, sweeter, like a lullaby made from honey and sorrow. And the children came. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They smiled. 42 small faces lit with strange peace. Bare feet pattered over cobblestones, hands swinging by their sides like pendulums. One by one, they followed him beyond the village, into the darkness beyond the mountain Vale. And then they were gone. Adela watched. She had always watched, silent, invisible, born without a voice, not from illness, but from something older. She had never spoken a word in her life. Her mother used to say that Adela's silence wasn't empty, but full, that it listened when others did not, that it saw what others would not face. She had no father, no siblings, no lullabies. But she had a promise. She would find them. The next morning, while the town performed its grief with dry eyes and dry bread, Adela slipped into the woods. She packed nothing. No one stopped her. She was used to being overlooked. She walked for 3 days through trees that twisted toward her like they recognized her name. Leaves shivered when she passed. Bark split open in long, quiet sighs. The deeper she walked, the stranger the forest became. Roots that pulsed beneath her steps, branches that curved like fingers reaching. And then it opened. The clearing was not touched by sun or moon. Light came from nowhere and everywhere, dimming and blooming like a candle flame caught in a windless room. The air pulsed with stillness. This was the Vale, and the children were there. They played among wildflowers that moved like they were breathing. They giggled and skipped and sang in strange, wordless hums, as if frozen in a perfect moment, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. The piper stood nearby, beneath an ash-grey tree that bent low above him like a crown. He looked at her, as if he'd known she was coming. He held out a reed flute, small, smooth, cool. She didn't take it. "You can't speak," he said softly, "but you can still sing." And somehow she could. She raised the flute, and the sound that emerged was trembling and whole. The children turned, listened, swayed. Something inside Adela unfolded. A part of her that had never had shape until that moment. She didn't cry, but she breathed like she'd never done it properly before. The piper smiled, not with triumph, but with an old, aching kind of sorrow. "You're different," he said. "You carry silence like a blade." They spent days together, perhaps weeks. Time in the Vale didn't move the same. Adela spoke through her music. The piper answered in stories. He told her of betrayal, of children abandoned in harsh winters while their elders hoarded firewood and bread, of villages that promised gold then bolted their doors. He insisted he wasn't a thief. "I rescue them," he said. "Here, they forget pain. They forget their names." And she almost believed him, until one night when the hush turned cold. She found a boy by the black pool near the Vale's edge. He whispered that his name had been Micah, that he used to have a mother. He asked if that could still be true. "Do I have a mother?" he repeated, staring into the water. "Did I?" Adela's next note cracked. A girl giggled nearby, and a moth flew out of her mouth. Another child lost a tooth that crumbled to dust before it hit the ground. Something inside her chilled. She began to notice things. How the children's laughter never reached their eyes. How they moved more like reflections than beings of flesh. How none of them ever grew hungry. Or older. They weren't living. Not really. That night, she searched the piper's quarters beneath the ash tree. Buried among its roots, twisted like old hands, was a chest. Inside, flutes. Dozens. All carved from bone, some thin and childlike, others too large for a child's body. One flute was ancient, its surface marked with names, dates, places. The list began centuries ago. Hamelin was simply the latest. And at the bottom, wrapped in a faded child's blanket, lay the darkest flute of all. Black as pitch, cold as morning. When she touched it, the vision came. A boy, shivering, forgotten, starving in a locked cellar while villagers toasted the first snow. A sacrifice to a cruel winter. And when he died, he did not pass quietly. His grief became a song. His ghost, the piper. At dawn, she confronted him. He stood beneath the ash tree, as if already waiting. She held the dark flute out to him. "You knew," she said with music that shook in her chest. "You made them forget. You feed on it." He didn't deny it. "I give them peace," he said. "Is that so monstrous?" His voice was tired, not cruel, just spent. They were already abandoned, just like I was. His eyes dulled, like coals gone cold. Adela raised the dark flute. "Don't," he whispered. "If you play that one, you'll become what I am." She didn't answer. She played. The sound wasn't music. It was thunder and mourning and fury made flesh. The ash trees split. The Vale groaned. The piper cried out, not in pain, but release. "Let me go," he whispered, and he vanished. Just like that. Adela stood alone. The children stirred. Micah remembered his mother's lullaby. Another child screamed for their father. One began to cry. They were real again. And they were hurting. Adela led them back. Through the trees, the hush, the cold. Back to Hamelin, where laughter now tasted of ash and celebration reeked of denial. No one welcomed them. No one cheered. But the children had come home. Adela had not. She stayed at the edge of the village. She slept beneath trees. The flute hung from her neck, not the cursed one. Heron, she could hear things now. Whispers beneath roots. Lullabies in the rustling of leaves. The grief of the world hummed in her blood. One night she played a single note. Far away, a rat stirred in its nest. A child began to hum in her sleep. Adela hadn't taken the piper's place. She had become his legacy. Thank you for joining us in the world of Twilight Fables. If you enjoyed this tale and want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more.